Have you ever noticed something strange about human nature? The people who treat us with kindness often become familiar, even predictable. Yet the people who ignore us, reject us, or seem emotionally unavailable somehow occupy the largest space in our mind. We replay conversations, wait for messages, invent explanations, and convince ourselves that if we just try a little harder, they'll finally see our worth. This isn't simply bad judgment, it's psychology. The human brain is not designed to seek what is healthy. It is designed to seek what feels unresolved. When someone gives you consistent attention, your mind relaxes because there is certainty. But when someone is inconsistent, warm one day, distant the next, they create uncertainty. And uncertainty is incredibly powerful. Your brain begins searching for answers, trying to solve what feels like an unfinished puzzle. Instead of moving on, you become emotionally invested in finding closure. This is why people often confuse emotional intensity with emotional value. They believe that because someone occupies their thoughts constantly, that person must be important. But frequency of thought is not proof of value. It is often proof of unresolved emotion. The more uncertain the situation becomes, the harder your mind works to understand it. In reality, you are not chasing the person as much as you are chasing the feeling of certainty they refuse to give you. There is another force at work, one that has influenced human behavior for centuries: scarcity. We naturally assume that what is difficult to obtain must be valuable. Businesses use this principle every day. Limited editions sell faster. Exclusive memberships appear more desirable. Scarcity creates perceived value. Unfortunately, we apply the same flawed logic to relationships. Someone who barely responds to your messages suddenly seems more interesting than the person who consistently shows up for you. Someone who gives you only fragments of attention begins to appear unique, mysterious, even extraordinary. But ask yourself a difficult question. Is that person truly exceptional, or have you simply mistaken their lack of availability for high value? Many people spend years chasing individuals who have done nothing remarkable except remain emotionally unavailable. They mistake distance for depth, silence for confidence, and indifference for strength. The less they receive, the more desperately they seek. It becomes a cycle where every small sign of attention feels like a reward. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It is one of the strongest conditioning mechanisms known to human behavior. Imagine a slot machine. If it never paid out, people would quickly lose interest. But because the reward comes unpredictably, they keep pulling the lever, believing the next attempt could be the winning one. Human relationships can work the same way. A delayed text message, a random compliment after weeks of silence, one unexpected phone call, one moment of affection after days of neglect. These small moments become emotional jackpots. Your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the belief that if you remain patient, the next reward is just around the corner. Before long, you are no longer pursuing a person. You are addicted to the possibility of being chosen. This is where many people lose themselves. Instead of asking, does this person deserve my attention? They begin asking, what must I do to earn theirs? That single shift changes everything. Without realizing it, they surrender their self-respect in exchange for approval that may never come. Think carefully about the danger of this pattern. Every time your mood depends on someone else's response, you hand them control over your emotional state. Your confidence rises when they notice you and collapses when they don't. Your peace no longer belongs to you. It belongs to whoever controls your attention. History has shown that those who understand human psychology often recognize this weakness. They know that people will chase what remains just out of reach. But wisdom teaches the opposite lesson. The strongest individuals refuse to let uncertainty dictate their decisions. They judge people by consistency, not by mystery. They understand that genuine respect does not require endless pursuit. The greatest mistake is believing that if someone finally chooses you after you've chased them long enough, the victory will heal your insecurity. It rarely does, because what began as a search for validation becomes a habit. If your self-worth depends on someone else's acceptance, no amount of acceptance will ever feel like enough. Real confidence begins the moment you stop asking, how can I make them value me? And start asking, why am I giving so much value to someone who has done so little to earn it? That question has the power to change your life because it shifts your focus from external approval to internal standards. The people who ignore you are not defining your worth. They are revealing where you have allowed your worth to be measured. Remember this, the strongest prison is not rejection. It is the belief that your value depends on being accepted by someone who never truly saw it in the first place. Once you understand why you chase people who ignore you, the next question becomes even more important. What does that pursuit actually cost you? Most people think the only risk is rejection. They believe that if someone doesn't respond to their messages or doesn't return their feelings, the worst outcome is disappointment. But rejection is rarely the greatest loss. The greatest loss is the quiet erosion of your personal power. Power is not about dominance or control over others. Real power begins with control over yourself. It is the ability to choose your actions instead of letting your emotions choose them for you. The moment you allow another person's attention to determine your peace of mind, you begin giving away that power piece by piece. Think about how people behave when they desperately want someone's approval. They send another message after being ignored. They make excuses for disrespectful behavior. They rearrange their schedules to be available at a moment's notice. They laugh harder, give more, tolerate more, and slowly lower their standards, hoping that one day their efforts will finally be rewarded. But something unexpected happens. The more they chase, the less respect they often receive. This seems unfair until you understand one of the oldest principles of human psychology. People naturally observe how you value yourself before deciding how much they should value you. Your behavior communicates your self-worth more loudly than your words ever can. Imagine meeting two individuals. One constantly seeks validation, apologizes unnecessarily, and seems afraid of losing your approval. The other is respectful, calm, confident, and comfortable whether you accept them or not. Without thinking, which person appears stronger? Which one seems more valuable? Confidence creates curiosity. Desperation creates distance. This is not because people are cruel. It is because human beings instinctively gravitate toward emotional stability. We trust those who seem capable of standing on their own. We become cautious around those whose happiness depends entirely on our response. Every text you send after being ignored carries a hidden message. It does not simply say, "I want to talk." It may also say, "My emotional state depends on your attention." Every unnecessary apology communicates, "I'm willing to accept less than I deserve if it keeps you around." Every time you tolerate disrespect out of fear of losing someone, you quietly teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. This is how power slips away, not in dramatic moments, but in small daily decisions. Robert Greene often emphasizes that power belongs to those who master themselves before attempting to influence anyone else. Emotional discipline has always been one of the rarest forms of strength. Most people react immediately to discomfort. They chase closure. They seek reassurance. They cannot tolerate silence. But those who possess genuine confidence understand something different. Silence is not always a problem to solve. Sometimes it is information to observe. When someone repeatedly ignores you, they are communicating something, even if they never speak the words. They are revealing their priorities, their interest, or their emotional capacity. The mistake many people make is believing they can negotiate genuine interest through persistence. You cannot persuade someone into valuing you. You cannot convince someone to appreciate your presence by making yourself constantly available. Respect cannot be begged for. It can only be earned and maintained. There is another psychological paradox worth understanding. The more available something becomes, the less valuable it often appears. We see this everywhere in life. Things that require effort usually feel more meaningful than things handed to us without limit. The same principle applies to attention. If someone knows you will always answer immediately, always forgive instantly, always return after every disappointment, they begin to assume your presence is guaranteed. What is guaranteed is often taken for granted. This does not mean you should manipulate people by pretending to be unavailable. Authentic confidence is not a strategy. It is a mindset. It means your life remains meaningful whether someone chooses to participate in it or not. People often misunderstand the phrase "know your worth." They imagine it means repeating positive affirmations or convincing themselves they are valuable. But self-worth is demonstrated through behavior. If you know your worth, you walk away from repeated disrespect. If you know your worth, you do not compete for attention. If you know your worth, you stop explaining your value to people determined not to see it. The strongest people are not those who never experience rejection. They are those who refuse to let rejection redefine them. Notice how calm, truly confident individuals appear. They are not chasing every opportunity to be liked. They are not constantly checking whether someone has replied. They understand that their energy is limited and they protect it carefully. They invest their attention where it is appreciated, not where it is merely tolerated. This changes every relationship in your life. When you stop chasing approval, your conversations become more genuine, your decisions become clearer, your boundaries become stronger. Ironically, people often begin respecting you more because they sense that your attention is no longer something they can take for granted. And even if they never return, something far more valuable has happened. You have returned to yourself because at the end of the day, your attention is your most valuable currency. Every minute you spend chasing someone who refuses to see your worth is a minute stolen from becoming the person you were meant to be. The moment you stop begging for attention is the moment your power begins to return. Protect it, because nothing is more valuable than a mind that no longer depends on someone else's approval. Once you begin reclaiming your power, you start seeing people differently. You stop listening only to what they say, and you begin paying attention to what they consistently do. This shift may seem simple, but it changes the way you experience every relationship. One of the greatest sources of unnecessary suffering is that people place more faith in promises than in patterns. They hold on to words while ignoring behavior, and behavior is always the more honest language. Human beings are remarkably skilled at explaining themselves. Someone can tell you they're busy, confused, overwhelmed, or afraid of commitment. Sometimes those explanations are true. Life is complicated, and everyone goes through difficult seasons. But when the same explanation appears over and over while the behavior never changes, something else is happening. At that point, you are no longer dealing with circumstances. You are dealing with priorities. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because it forces us to abandon comforting illusions. We prefer to believe that the people who ignore us secretly care but simply don't know how to show it. We imagine hidden feelings beneath distant actions. We create stories that protect us from disappointment. The imagination becomes a refuge where reality cannot reach us, but reality always speaks through action. A person who values your presence finds ways to include you. A person who respects you makes room for you. A person who genuinely wants to know you does not leave you constantly questioning where you stand. Perfection is impossible. Consistency is not. Many people spend months or even years waiting for someone's potential instead of accepting their reality. They say, I know they're capable of loving me. Perhaps they are, but capability means very little without willingness. A seed has the potential to become a tree, but if it is never planted, watered, or exposed to sunlight, that potential changes nothing. Relationships are no different. The potential cannot comfort you. Potential cannot build trust. Potential cannot replace consistent effort. The danger of living in potential is that it keeps you emotionally invested in a future that exists only in your imagination. Meanwhile, the present keeps giving you the same answer again and again. There is an old tendency within human psychology known as confirmation bias. We naturally search for evidence that supports what we already want to believe. If we desperately hope someone cares about us, we magnify every small act of kindness while minimizing repeated neglect. A single thoughtful message becomes proof of deep affection. 10 unanswered messages become understandable exceptions. Notice how selective the mind becomes when emotion takes control. It remembers the compliment. It forgets the indifference. It remembers the one unforgettable conversation. It ignores months of emotional absence. The mind protects hope because hope feels safer than acceptance. Yet false hope often becomes the very thing that prolongs suffering. Wise people learn to observe patterns instead of isolated moments. Patterns reveal character. Anyone can behave well for a day, a week, or even a month. Character is revealed through repetition. Respect is revealed through consistency. Priorities become visible over time. Think about the people who truly matter in your life. They may not always be available. They may become busy. They may disappoint you occasionally. But there is a difference between occasional absence and habitual neglect. One is a consequence of life. The other is a reflection of value. This distinction matters because many people confuse being understanding with abandoning their own standards. Compassion is a beautiful quality, but compassion without boundaries becomes self-neglect. You can understand someone's struggles without allowing those struggles to become an excuse for endless disrespect. There comes a moment when maturity requires asking a difficult question. If I remove their words from the equation and judge them only by their actions, what conclusion would I reach? That question strips away fantasy. It removes excuses. It exposes reality because actions are expensive. They require time, energy, attention, and commitment. Words are inexpensive. They cost almost nothing. Someone may tell you that you matter, but do they make time for you? Someone may promise they'll change, but have they changed? Someone may insist you're important, but do their daily choices support that claim? Your life becomes much simpler when you stop arguing with evidence. Reality is not cruel. Reality is clear. It frees you from wasting years trying to decode mixed signals that were never truly mixed at all. Perhaps the greatest act of self-respect is believing people the first time they consistently show you who they are. Not because they are perfect, but because repeated behavior is the closest thing we have to truth. And remember something equally important. You are not responsible for convincing someone to recognize your value. If they repeatedly overlook your kindness, your loyalty, your effort, or your presence, that is information, not an invitation to work harder. The strongest people do not spend their lives trying to become irresistible to those who remain indifferent. They simply redirect their energy toward places where respect already exists. They understand that life is too short to fight for a seat at a table where no one saved them a place. Every relationship teaches you something. Some teach you how to love, others teach you when to leave. Both lessons are valuable, but only if you are willing to learn them. So the next time someone repeatedly ignores your effort, resist the temptation to invent another excuse on their behalf. Watch what they do. Observe the pattern. Accept the message that their actions have been quietly delivering all along. Never let beautiful words silence undeniable actions. People reveal their priorities every day. The wisdom lies in believing what they consistently show you, not what you desperately hope is true. Once you stop chasing people who ignore you and begin accepting reality instead of fighting it, an empty space appears in your life. At first, that space can feel uncomfortable. The time you once spent checking your phone, replaying conversations, or wondering why someone didn't choose you suddenly becomes available. Most people rush to fill that emptiness with another distraction or another person. But the wisest decision you can make is to fill that space with yourself. This is where your life begins to change. Every human being possesses a limited amount of attention. It is your most valuable resource because whatever receives your attention eventually shapes your future. If you invest your attention in people who refuse to appreciate you, your life becomes smaller. If you invest that same attention in developing yourself, your life expands in ways you cannot yet imagine. Consider this question. What would happen if you redirected even half the energy you've spent trying to impress someone into improving your own life? Imagine reading books that sharpen your thinking instead of rereading old messages. Imagine exercising instead of waiting for a reply. Imagine learning a valuable skill instead of trying to become more appealing to someone who has already shown you where you stand. Within months, you would not only feel different, you would become different. One of the greatest misunderstandings about confidence is the belief that it comes from external validation. Many people think confidence appears when enough people admire them, compliment them, or choose them. But that kind of confidence is fragile because it depends on circumstances outside your control. Real confidence is earned. It grows every time you keep a promise to yourself. Every workout completed, every difficult conversation faced, every new skill mastered, every disciplined morning, every temptation resisted. These small victories accumulate until they create something powerful. Self-trust. Self-trust is far more valuable than self-esteem. Self-esteem often depends on how you feel about yourself. Self-trust depends on evidence. It comes from repeatedly proving that you can rely on yourself, even when life becomes uncomfortable. This is why deeply confident people appear calm. They are not constantly seeking reassurance because they have already built an internal foundation. Their identity is rooted in their actions, not in other people's opinions. History consistently rewards individuals who focus more on mastery than approval. Think of great artists, philosophers, inventors, and leaders. Their attention was directed toward creating, learning, and improving. They understood that chasing admiration rarely produces greatness. Greatness itself naturally attracts admiration. There is an important distinction here. Do not improve yourself so people who ignored you will regret losing you. Improve yourself because becoming stronger is your responsibility. The difference is subtle but profound. If your motivation is revenge, the people who rejected you still control your direction. They remain at the center of your decisions. But when your motivation becomes personal growth, you reclaim ownership of your life. Now you are no longer reacting to the past. You are building the future. This shift transforms everything. Instead of asking, how can I make them notice me? You begin asking, what kind of person am I becoming? That question changes your priorities. You begin protecting your physical health because your body is the foundation of your energy. You strengthen your mind because clear thinking protects you from emotional manipulation. You improve your finances because independence creates freedom. You develop discipline because discipline allows you to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort. Every improvement becomes an investment in a version of yourself that no rejection can diminish. There is also something fascinating about human nature. People are naturally drawn toward individuals who have purpose, not because purpose is attractive by itself, but because purpose changes behavior. Someone with meaningful goals no longer has unlimited emotional energy to spend chasing unavailable people. Their schedule becomes full. Their mind becomes occupied with building rather than begging. Ironically, this is often when others begin paying attention, not because you played games, not because you pretended to be unavailable, but because you genuinely became unavailable to unnecessary drama. Your focus shifted. your standards rose, your life gained momentum. People notice momentum. However, this is where many people make another mistake. When attention finally arrives, they immediately return to old habits. They abandon their goals for temporary validation. They sacrifice discipline for approval. They mistake renewed interest for genuine respect. Never forget why you started changing. Your purpose was never to become irresistible. Your purpose was to become unshakable. An unshakable person understands that relationships should complement life, not become its entire foundation. Love is meaningful. Friendship is valuable. Connection enriches us. But none of these should replace the relationship you have with yourself, because when you become someone who respects your own time, protects your own peace, and continually develops your abilities, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing rejection, not because rejection disappears, but because your identity no longer depends on being accepted by everyone. You realize that your value cannot be increased by someone's attention or reduced by their absence. That realization is freedom. The world has always rewarded those who create more than they consume, who build more than they beg, and who invest more in themselves than in winning the approval of those who never intended to appreciate them. So let your ambition become louder than your insecurity. Let your purpose become stronger than your loneliness. Let your daily discipline replace your desperate need for validation. The greatest transformation does not happen when someone finally chooses you. It happens when you finally choose yourself. The moment your purpose becomes greater than your need for approval, you stop chasing people, and you start attracting the life you were meant to live. After you have invested in yourself and built a life centered on purpose rather than approval, you arrive at one of the most difficult lessons of all. Learning when to walk away. For many people, walking away feels like failure. They believe that leaving means giving up too soon, admitting defeat, or proving they were not strong enough to make the relationship work. But that belief comes from misunderstanding what strength really is. Strength is not measured by how much pain you can tolerate. It is measured by how clearly you can recognize when your energy is being wasted. There is a profound difference between perseverance and attachment. Perseverance is continuing toward a goal that continues to reward your effort. Attachment is continuing towards someone who repeatedly demonstrates that your effort changes nothing. One builds your future, the other slowly consumes it. Many people remain trapped because they confuse endurance with loyalty. They tell themselves, if I just stay patient a little longer, they'll change. They believe that one more conversation, one more apology, or one more sacrifice will finally produce the relationship they have imagined for so long. But reality rarely works that way. People can change, but genuine change begins with personal desire, not external pressure. You cannot love someone into respecting you. You cannot sacrifice enough to make another person value your presence. And you certainly cannot negotiate genuine interest through persistence. The difficult truth is that every moment you spend trying to convince someone to appreciate you is a moment you are silently convincing yourself that your worth is negotiable. Think about what happens psychologically when you refuse to leave situations that repeatedly hurt you. Your brain gradually adjusts to disrespect. Behaviors that once seemed unacceptable begin to feel normal. Delayed responses become expected. Broken promises become understandable. Emotional neglect becomes something you learn to tolerate. This process is dangerous because people rarely lose their self-respect all at once. It disappears gradually, one ignored message, one canceled plan, one broken promise, one excuse after another. Eventually, what once would have offended you becomes something you accept simply because you fear losing the person altogether. That is the hidden cost of refusing to walk away. Walking away is not punishment, it is protection. You are not trying to make someone suffer. You are refusing to allow yourself to suffer indefinitely. This distinction matters because many people secretly hope that leaving will make the other person realize what they lost. Sometimes that happens. Often it does not. But if your decision to leave depends on their reaction, then emotionally you have not truly left at all. Real detachment means releasing the need to control the outcome. You stop wondering whether they miss you. You stop imagining what they might say months from now. You stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. Instead, your attention returns to the only person whose choices you can control, yourself. This is where boundaries become essential. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls that push people away. In reality, healthy boundaries are simply clear standards that protect your peace. They communicate what you will accept and what you will no longer tolerate. People who lack boundaries usually believe they are being kind, but endless availability is not kindness. Endless tolerance is not compassion. Without boundaries, generosity becomes permission for others to take without responsibility. The remarkable thing about boundaries is that they reveal the true nature of relationships. The people who genuinely care about you may not always agree with your boundaries, but they will respect them. Those who benefited from your lack of boundaries often become angry the moment you begin protecting yourself. Pay attention to that reaction. Sometimes the strongest evidence that a boundary was necessary is the resistance you receive after setting it. There is another paradox worth understanding. Absence has a unique power. When you are constantly available, people rarely have the opportunity to recognize your value because they assume you will always be there. But when you respectfully remove yourself from situations where you are not appreciated, reality becomes impossible to ignore. This does not mean disappearing as a manipulation. It means refusing to remain where your presence is treated as ordinary while your effort is treated as expected. Whether others recognize your absence is ultimately their decision. Whether you continue accepting disrespect is yours. History repeatedly reminds us that dignity has always required sacrifice. Every person who has ever lived according to principle has eventually faced moments where they had to choose between comfort and self-respect. Those who chose comfort often gained temporary peace but lost themselves. Those who chose self-respect sometimes endured loneliness, but they preserved something infinitely more valuable, their identity. Loneliness is temporary. The loss of self-respect can last for years. And here is the irony that surprises so many people. The moment you become willing to lose someone who refuses to value you, you become emotionally free. Fear no longer controls your decisions. Anxiety no longer dictates your actions. You stop negotiating your standards just to avoid being alone. That freedom changes the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you make decisions, and the kinds of people you allow into your life. Because once you have experienced the peace that comes from protecting your dignity, you become far less willing to exchange that peace for inconsistent attention. Always remember that your life is not measured by how many people stayed. It is measured by whether you stayed true to yourself while others came and went. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of a relationship where your effort is invisible, your loyalty is expected, and your value is constantly questioned, do not fear walking away. Fear becoming the kind of person who no longer remembers what genuine respect feels like. Sometimes the most powerful step forward is the one that leads you away. Walk away from what diminishes you, and you make room for everything that honors your worth. As we reach the end of this journey, everything we have discussed leads to one final realization. The real battle was never about the people who ignored you. It was never about the messages that went unanswered, the invitations that were declined, or the affection that was never returned. Those were only symptoms. The deeper question has always been this. When will you choose yourself? For many people, this question feels uncomfortable because they have spent years defining themselves through other people's opinions. They measure their worth by how much they are loved, admired, included, or validated. When others approve of them, they feel confident. When others reject them, they begin questioning who they are. But think about how fragile that way of living truly is. If your identity depends on someone else's opinion, then your peace can be taken away at any moment. A delayed reply can ruin your day. A single criticism can erase months of confidence. One person's indifference becomes powerful enough to control your emotions. That is not freedom. Freedom begins the moment your opinion of yourself becomes stronger than anyone else's opinion of you. This does not mean becoming arrogant or believing you are superior to others. Quite the opposite. Truly confident people do not need to announce their value because they no longer depend on constant confirmation. They have developed something far more stable. Inner conviction. Inner conviction is built quietly. It grows every time you honor your principles, even when no one is watching. It grows every time you refuse to compromise your dignity for temporary approval. It grows every time you choose long-term peace over short-term validation. These moments may appear insignificant, but together they create an identity that cannot easily be shaken. There is an ancient philosophical idea that remains remarkably relevant today. It teaches that while you cannot control the actions of others, you always possess authority over your own character. This distinction is the foundation of emotional resilience. You cannot force someone to respect you. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot force someone to understand your value. But you can decide whether their inability to do so will determine the direction of your life. Most people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to change external circumstances while neglecting the only territory they truly own, their own mind. Imagine how different your life would become if every ounce of energy you once invested in seeking approval was redirected toward becoming wiser, healthier, calmer, stronger, and more disciplined. Imagine waking each morning asking not, "Who will choose me today?" but instead, "What kind of person will I become today?" That single question changes the focus of your entire existence, because life has never been a competition to collect the approval of strangers. It is an opportunity to cultivate a character worthy of your own respect. One of the most liberating discoveries you will ever make is that not everyone is supposed to appreciate you. Every remarkable individual throughout history has been misunderstood, criticized, rejected, or ignored by someone. Universal approval has never existed. Trying to please everyone is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. The stronger your values become, the more comfortable you become with the possibility that some people simply will not understand you. And that is perfectly acceptable. Maturity is not measured by how many people like you. It is measured by how little you are willing to betray yourself in order to be liked. Notice how peaceful life becomes once you stop chasing acceptance. You begin choosing relationships based on mutual respect rather than emotional desperation. You stop forcing conversations that have already ended. You stop reopening doors that life has repeatedly closed. Instead, you begin recognizing opportunities that were invisible before because your attention was trapped in the past. You notice the friends who consistently support you. You appreciate the family members who genuinely care. You become grateful for quiet moments instead of fearing them. You discover ambitions that had been buried beneath insecurity. In other words, you stop living reactively and begin living intentionally. This transformation does not happen overnight. There will still be moments when rejection hurts. There will still be days when loneliness whispers that chasing someone would be easier than facing yourself. In those moments, remember everything we have explored. Remember that uncertainty creates obsession. Remember that chasing weakens your power. Remember that actions reveal priorities. Remember that your greatest investment is yourself. Remember that walking away protects your dignity. These are not separate lessons. They are pieces of the same philosophy. A philosophy built on self-respect, because self-respect changes everything. It changes the people you allow into your life. It changes the opportunities you pursue. It changes the standards you refuse to lower. It changes the future you create. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You no longer fear being ignored because your happiness is no longer waiting for someone else's permission. You no longer chase people because your purpose gives you direction. You no longer beg for attention because you have learned to value your own. And perhaps most importantly, you stop asking whether you are enough. You simply become the kind of person whose actions answer that question every single day. When that day arrives, rejection loses its power. Silence loses its power. Indifference loses its power, because the greatest victory was never making someone else choose you. It was learning that your life became extraordinary the moment you chose yourself first. So as you leave here today, carry this truth with you. Your future will not be determined by the people who overlooked your worth. It will be determined by whether you continue overlooking it yourself. The world will always contain people who fail to recognize your value, but you must never become one of them. Stop chasing those who ignore you. Start building a life that reflects your highest standards. Protect your peace without apology. And remember this: the moment you choose yourself completely is the moment no one else's rejection can ever define you again.